Good morning, dear colleagues and our online followers. This morning we're privileged to hold an interview and a press conference with the Ambassador of the Netherlands to the Republic of Armenia, Mr. Nikolas Schermers, which is taking place in the framework of the SEPA, the Comprehensive and Extended Partnership Agreement between Armenia and the EU. Welcome, Your Excellency. I would like to also let you know that this event is taking place in the framework of the corporate monitoring of the civil society program, and the purpose is to raise awareness of the Republic, the citizens of the Republic of Armenia. The simultaneous interpreting of the conference will be following. So in the context of the cooperation with EU and its member states, of utmost importance is the SEPA agreements, the Comprehensive and Extended Partnership Agreement between the EU and Armenia, as an important tool for promote and encourage different kinds of reforms taking place in the country. Before we move on, could you please present to us the perspectives in general of the partnership between Armenia and Netherlands? What are the main fields of interest over which the two countries?
Շնորհակալություն եւ բարևձեզ շատ ուրախ եմ հանդիպել ձեզ հետ եւ նաեւ շատ ուրախ եմ այս հնարավորության համար քննարկել կարևոր հարցեր երկկողմ համագործակցության մասին Սովորում եմ հայերեն, բայց ձեր թույլտվությամբ կշարունակեմ անգլերեն.
Խնդրեմ, շնորհակալություն.
So thank you very much for inviting me for this event. I'm very glad to be here today. And SEPA indeed has become effective as of 1st of March, which is also underlined now by the fact that the EU Commissioner for External Relations will visit Armenia in this week, later this week. In as far as the relationship between the Netherlands and Armenia is concerned, I think it's important to highlight that the Netherlands decided to open an embassy in 2018. My minister was here early 2020, just before the COVID situation made it impossible for further traveling, to announce that the embassy was going to be opened, and I was appointed in April. I started my job in June by working in particular with Armenian diaspora in the Netherlands, because I couldn't travel either to Armenia at the time. I arrived in August last year, just before the war started, which of course put my job in a completely different perspective. And I think to a certain extent it was a blessing in disguise, because it allowed my country in any case to be informed also about the situation on this side of the war. At the same time, of course, I had to put all my energy in the reporting about the war and could not focus that much on setting up the embassy. However, we have succeeded so far. The embassy is up and running. We don't have all our infrastructure in place yet, but that is work in progress, so to say. We have started our programs. A number of programs and projects were already set up in the past by our colleagues in Tbilisi, but we have taken over that program from them. And now we're focusing on our own activities. And basically, I think I can mention that we're working in a number of areas. First of all, there is the area of the rule of law and democracy. That is where we are at the moment identifying some projects. We're in discussion with a number of NGOs, with civil society, with the parliament, with the constitutional court, to see what we can do, what we can contribute to help Armenia in building up its democratic institutions. Secondly, I would like to mention human rights. That is, of course, always an important topic for the Netherlands in its foreign policy. And why? Because we believe that people All people in the world have the same rights, have the right to develop themselves, have the right to be safe. And that, from that perspective, we build our society. We think it's also important to get the best out of people. When people are in a position to develop themselves to the maximum extent, it will contribute to the development of the state, of all the people in the state. So that is another aspect we're looking at. And then we're also looking at the economic domain. Maybe two areas there. Armenia is part of the constituency of the Netherlands and some other countries in financial institutions like the World Bank, like IMF, like EBRD. And that is why we have a quite intense program or cooperation in any case in the field of financial institutions. Our central bank is in very close contact with your central bank. Our Ministry of Finance has excellent contacts with your Ministry of Finance. So in the macroeconomic area, in that regard, we are looking very much to each other and working closely together. In further economic cooperation, the embassy is looking very much into the agricultural sector. The Netherlands is the second exporter of agricultural goods in the world, after the United States were the biggest in absolute terms. Agriculture always has our interest. And we have noticed that in Armenia there are a number of interesting aspects. First of all, you have your very specific environment, which is totally different than the Dutch environment. Your lowest point in Armenia is higher than our highest point in the Netherlands. So that creates a completely different circumstances. But we're looking in particular to, the whole range of activities in agriculture. And that is where we try to find some further cooperation. Next to that, I think I would like to mention the ICT sector, the IT sector, where Armenia is, has quite some promising activities ongoing. Yesterday I visited the Tumol Center. I was very much impressed by what is happening there. And we're looking into possibilities to map out cooperation activities between Dutch and Armenian IT companies. And of course there is tourism. Hopefully in the very short run we will get further information about the status of Armenia with regard to traveling. We hope that the COVID situation here has improved so much that indeed traveling will become easier. And then I think that Dutch people will certainly be interested to come to Armenia again. So I think that is good. I leave it to that as a first round.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm also interested in the investors who have invested in Armenia. Which are the main sectors of interest, and what activities what are the necessary steps conducting a hospitable environment for industry in Armenia?
Thank you very much for that question. Very important question, very interesting question. A question I do not have a full answer to yet, because I'm being surprised almost every day. I see a lot of activities ongoing between the Netherlands and Armenia. On the one hand, I see a number of Dutch companies who are already active here, but I see also a number of Armenian Dutch people. They live in the Netherlands, but they have an interest in Armenia, and they have their own businesses running or are trying to set something up. And basically, since we did not have an embassy present here, we do not have the clear picture of all these activities. So one of my tasks is to bring that closer together, to find out who is already active here, in what sector, with what activities. And maybe they can also learn from each other. So that is what I'm trying, or what is the purpose, one of my purposes for the next year to come. Yeah, and for the rest, I think if you look at agriculture, I've seen many aspects of activities already. I forgot to mention in my previous answer that one of the very important aspects of Armenia is that Armenia is now having this SEPA agreement in operation between the EU and Armenia. But Armenia is also a member of the Eurasia Union, which makes it also very interesting for investors to come to Armenia. And on top of that, I think, and that is perhaps one of your biggest assets, what are foreign direct investors always looking for? That is security. They want the rule of law. They need transparency in legislation, because that allows them to make plans for the future. Usually, well, they don't like to pay tax, but if they have to pay tax, then they would like to have clarity what the level of that tax is going to be. And if you take Armenia, I think it has a number of aspects in that regard, and that is why we are also working on the rule of law and democracy, to keep that up to a high level, or even to improve it where possible, because that will attract further investments.
Your Excellency, the SEPA agreement between EU and Armenia, and as you also mentioned, the SEPA term, the SEPA abbreviation in the English language has been enacted for 4 months now. What potential does it have for the relations between Armenia and Netherlands? Can we state that this is a new quality, a new level of relations, and what is your assessment of the cooperation so far?
Yeah, that is a good question. Maybe too difficult for me to answer. I think this might be more a question for my colleagues from the EU delegation. However, what I can say is that the SEPA agreement is active indeed formally since the 1st of March, but a number of provisions were already provisionally implemented before that. So the shock of the 1st of March is not so big, I would say. Secondly, the concrete effects are difficult to measure, since I don't know what the past was. As I mentioned, I don't have this picture yet. But what I have noticed is that there is quite an increase, or in any case there is quite some demand from the Dutch side to do business with Armenia. Armenia is getting on the radar, and also thanks to your ambassador in the Netherlands, who is a very active ambassador, is promoting Armenian interest in the Netherlands tremendously. And well, I'm trying to do that from my side, and hope to bring it to a higher level in any case. But the concrete figures I don't have.
Your Excellency, you also mentioned that even though it has been, the agreement has been enacted since March 1st, 2021, but the provisions, about 80% of the provisions, the biggest share of it, until the approval of it had been put into power, was given speed. And before it was officially enacted, what exactly has been conducted in this agreement, like you said in advance, if you have any information?
Well, again, the SEPA agreement itself is comprising the relationship of Armenia with the entire continent of Europe, or in any case the EU as such. A number of parts are taken up there. There are political paragraphs, there is the economic paragraph, there's trade, scientific cooperation, cultural cooperation, so many of those aspects. And I think in that sense, much was going on already, but this is bringing it under a certain umbrella, and I think that is also the importance of such an agreement. We have now an umbrella between the EU and Armenia. For Dutch activities in particular, I don't think that people in the Netherlands who had an interest in Armenia are specifically or were specifically waiting for the agreement. But now they might find out that in a number of areas it has become easier, or it will become easier, to do business with Armenia, to set up activities, to do cultural exchanges, etc. So I think the challenge is not so much in trying to find out what has the SEPA agreement brought already. I think the challenge will be how to implement it in such a way that Armenia gets the best out of it. Because for Armenia, I think this is, relatively speaking, quite a big agreement. For the EU, with all respect, Armenia is, of course, just one of many countries and not a very big one. So I think the challenge is in particular on the Armenian side in that regard. But that is where local embassies and the EU delegation here are also capable of assisting and helping Armenians to make use of the agreement.
Your Excellency, the international policy, the international relations between the two countries enjoy a long history, but the decision to open an embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands here, it was coincidental, it coincided with the enactment of the agreement. And would you say that the opening of the embassy marks a new beginning for the relations between the two countries?
Absolutely, but I first would like to go back to the year 347, which marks perhaps one of the earliest contacts between Armenia and the Netherlands. And I would like to mention in this regard, we have in the Netherlands the city of Maastricht, which is the most southern city, where Catholicism started in the Netherlands, and that is where the Netherlands started its Christianity, basically. This came from Maastricht and was brought by a saint, Saint Servatius. He came to the Netherlands in the year 347 and started Christianity. He came from Armenia, so the story tells. Which means that basically we were christened because of Armenia's christening in the year 301. There is a very direct relationship in that regard. But we have more links. I also would like to mention the tulip, which I found here in the mountains, in the wild, which is of course one of the main export products of the Netherlands nowadays. And in that regard, I would like to mention that there is since last month an Aragats tulip, a very nice white tulip which is named after Aragats. Another aspect of our long-term relationship is the first Bible that was printed, also printed in the Netherlands. There is a copy here in Matanadaran. In Matanadaran, it's a copy of the first printed Bible. Then the decision to open an embassy here, that was a long-standing decision, I would say. My government was already looking at the region for a longer time, and we have opened embassies in all the Eastern Partnership countries. We did not do so in Armenia yet. The financial crisis 10 years ago made it very difficult to open embassies. We even had to close embassies in those days. So that decision basically was postponed. And then at some point Armenia was high on the list. We had a discussion in Parliament, and our Parliament was very much in favor of opening an embassy as a reward for Armenia's Velvet Revolution, to support democratic movement in Armenia and to show that support by opening an embassy. So that decision was basically taken by the end of 2018. Early 2019 it more or less came into effect, and budgets were found, and well, you have a whole administration that has to be set up then, and that led to the minister coming to Armenia early 2020 to explain or to announce.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much that you have the opportunity to address your questions. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to voice them. Your Excellency, I'm representing Azatution TV. You mentioned about tourism and the development of the sector in Armenia. I'm wondering if you are aware that several countries already have opened their borders for Armenia. with the, of course, with the provision of a negative COVID-19 test, and if there's proof that they have been, the visitor has been vaccinated, do you think there's a chance for change in the access between the two countries, that the Netherlands will perhaps advance this by opening its borders for Armenia? What kind of changes are expected? And then I'll ask the other part of my question after your answer.
Well, I certainly do hope so. I'm very optimistic in that regard. I hope that decisions in that regard will be taken very soon. I've noticed and I've reported about the figures, the COVID figures in Armenia being quite low for a long time already. And that has not been unnoticed in the Netherlands. So hopefully we can look forward to a positive decision soon, meaning that probably people will be able to travel again back and forth. That the visas can be issued again, maybe under certain conditions. That is, of course, in these times quite possible. We have to wait for that. But again, I'm very optimistic.
And my second question, Your Excellency, is you're well aware of the problems that Armenia was facing after the war, especially the issue of the return of the prisoners of war, and it seems to me that the international public is silent and neutral towards the issues, as well as the tension on the border. I don't know if you know, but the border was especially tense yesterday. There was mutual gunfire. I was wondering about the response of the government of the Netherlands to these issues. You earlier mentioned that the Kingdom of Netherlands, the government of the country, is highly concerned about this issue. What is taking place now?
Yes, indeed, I'm aware of the situation. It's terrible what happened, of course, in the war. I have to address also the fact that for the Netherlands, this war started already 30 years ago. We have international borders that, basically the territorial integrity of countries is a very important point for us. And in that regard, we have, we basically focus our efforts through the EU, through the OSCE. The Minsk group is for us the leading party to make sure that a solution is found for this conflict. And of course, I'm reporting back also on the humanitarian needs of the people here. We are trying to do what we can to mobilize resources to support that. I would like to mention that the Netherlands, as member of the EU, is also directing a lot of money through the EU in that regard, and to organizations like ICRC, the Red Cross, is getting core funding from the Netherlands exactly to address situations like this. But it has our attention. The Netherlands is a small player in this regard, so therefore our efforts are going through the OSCE and the EU, but we certainly hope that a solution is found soon.
Your Excellency, as an extension to the question, the Parliament of the Netherlands approved this new formula, this new decision, according to which they urge the Azerbaijani side to return the Armenian prisoners of war. How do you envisage this to happen?
Again, maybe I have to explain a little bit about Dutch democracy. Our parliament is indeed one institution that can adopt motions. That is not automatically government policy. However, having said that, we have, as government of the Netherlands, also said very clearly, prisoners of war need to be returned immediately without conditions, because that is what international law states. And again, also in this context, the Netherlands is a small country, so if we have opportune moments, we will raise the issue with whomever is our counterpart at that stage. but we direct our efforts mainly through the EU and through the OSCE in order to be most effective. We think it's very important that the Minsk group is here leading and gets the support of as many countries as possible.
Very much, thank you. But nonetheless, the mediations was also approved by the parliament of the country, which urged to enact sanctions against Turkey and Azerbaijan for the war crimes that were enacted. All these mediations, how do you assess how would you evaluate the impact that this mediation has had? What are your expectations from this?
Well, what my expectations are is perhaps not so relevant. I think we have to be realistic in this sense. For the Netherlands, it's clear our policy is that after a war, accountability is necessary. All parties need to be held responsible for the deeds they did during an armed conflict. And that is also the position of my government in this particular conflict. So we hope that, at some point there will be further negotiations about a long-standing peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Of course, we understand that many things need to be solved before that. But once it's getting that far, I certainly hope that we will reach a solution. And again, I also would like to mention in this context the important asset Armenia has. I mentioned democracy before, and at some point earlier this year, we also saw that there was some political turmoil here in the country. There were demonstrations. There was even speak of a coup d'etat. My colleagues in The Hague were asking me what is going on, and I said this is democracy in full function, democracy at work, and that's what's happening here is basically that people are talking to each other. They are demonstrating. People in the Netherlands are also demonstrating. Sometimes it's perhaps a bit rough, and the moment you enter into violence, it's of course always a step too far. But democratic institutions are standing strong, and that is, I think, what is a very strong asset of Armenia for the long run. As I mentioned, it might or it will attract foreign direct investors because they like that kind of situation. And with that spirit in mind, I think that Armenia has a bright future ahead.
Thank you very much. The war has indeed has impacted and affected in a negative sense democracy in the country greatly, but we have to return from square one and try to revitalize the countries here. Thank you very much for your time. If dear journalists, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to voice them. Another question, Your Excellency. Azerbaijan has declared that the conflict is completely resoluted, but until the status of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic has been finally stated, we cannot consider it to be solved. What do you think the role-playing of Netherlands can be with this regard? You mentioned several times that it's nevertheless a small country, but yet how does the government of the country envisage this resolution?
I'm afraid I'm going to repeat myself. This is indeed part of the conflict, and we know that the final resolution is needed to get to a lasting peace. And in that regard, the Netherlands is again part of the EU, part of the OSCE, and supporting the Minsk group in order to reach that agreement between the two parties. But in the first place, it will be the responsibility of the two countries to find that solution under the leadership of the Minsk group co-chairs.
I would like to ask a question about your activities with civil society. Is the embassy planning to or implement any programs with the civil society of the country, and can you bring any, for instance? Thank you.
Certainly, and well, I think we had last week a very interesting session in Zachkazor with one of your colleagues here, where we met with a number of students. This afternoon I'm going to meet other group of students from a different civil society organization. Yesterday we had the awarding ceremony of EPF Armenia, funded by the Netherlands, where we basically had prizes for a number of articles that were written by journalists on the topic of minorities, the religious minorities. But that kind of activities is ongoing and will be ongoing for the years to come. I hope to intensify that our cooperation in that regard. In the past, this was done by our embassy in Tbilisi, and of course they had good programs here. But at the same time, it's different when you're active locally. I've met so many people, so many NGOs here. Creativity is tremendous, so I'm looking forward very much to do a lot of cooperation. And maybe a couple of words on our program in that regard for this year. Since we are a new embassy, I have decided to spread our activities to many smaller projects, and that is partly, for instance, in gender equality. We have a couple of projects in that regard. As I mentioned before, human rights, including LGBTI, is also a very important topic in our foreign policy. So also there I'm supporting minority groups. Again, from the perspective of we want to help create diversity, because that helps society to develop. But also we're looking at, as I mentioned, the Parliament, the Constitutional Court, other organizations. Yesterday I briefly spoke to the human rights defender. Maybe we will have projects with him. So I think that in many areas we are active. We will be active, and that is only going to intensify.
And in conclusion, you said that you constantly hold different meetings with different bodies and different officials in the country, including the human rights defender, etc. How efficient how productive would you say these meetings are?
I think these meetings are very productive because it helps my government to get a clear picture of developments in Armenia. And I think that this kind of meetings is important also for Armenia to reach out to other nations to make clear what are the priorities of the country, and that helps us to define how to support that. I think for a country like Armenia, it's very important to have this coordination of all the activities. And if I don't have that clear picture and just deal with civil society, you always run the risk that you're doing something counterproductive or something that is duplication of something else. And therefore, these meetings are very productive. And I'm therefore looking very much forward to get to be informed about the new government. So that we can intensify these discussions again, also with new ministers, and to proceed in our cooperation to bring it to a higher level and to help Armenia to recover from the very bad last year.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. If there are any questions that you did not voice but you'd like to address, please ask your questions. Are there any questions that you yourself would like to relate to, speak about?
Questions to answer that were not asked. Yeah. No. I think the only thing I want to mention again is that Armenia has a lot to be proud of. And that is, as I mentioned, the democratic institutions you have, but also I'm very much pleased by the way I was received in the country in terms of hospitality, in terms of food, wines, everything is here. that is, those things are very much ingredients for a bright future. And I think that is what Armenia should focus on, should capitalize, and that is what we are looking for in any case in a relationship to build on the good cooperation between the two peoples. And I think that with that in mind, there is a bright future ahead.
Thank you very much. And again, as a final conclusion, again, coming back to the SEPA agreement, could you please assessment the implementation of mutual responsibilities on both sides? How well is it being done?
Again, that we are looking at it from a government side, what we can do. At the same time, this is for a large extent also a European thing. We have to put perhaps some activities in place, some programs in place, and I know that my colleagues in the EU are working hard on that. At the same time, it's probably also learning by doing. We need to find out from both sides what is beneficial in the relationship, what works, and where do we find bottlenecks. So how do we proceed with these? How can we intensify the areas where things are going well, and how do we take away the bottlenecks? And that is not something you put on paper and is effective one day later. This is something by setting up the activities. Concrete businesses need to contact or need to find other businesses on the other side. And once these businesses are working, are doing their things, they will encounter issues, they will see new opportunities. And the same for civil society, for cultural organizations, for youth, etc. So it's basically the start of a whole new process. And it's a long road where we may not even reach the end, but it's I think the process that is very much important. We have to explore all the possibilities, and I think it's up to the creativity of both our peoples to make use to the maximum extent of the agreement.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your time and for setting aside some time from a busy schedule for this interview, and I wish all the best for the cooperation between the two countries. Let me remind that this interview was taking place with the ambassador of Netherlands to Armenia, Ms. Nikolas Skhhermers, in the context of the SEPA agreement between Armenia and the EU. His Excellency was our host today, and he addressed different issues in the framework in light of the currently underway SEPA agreement. The event was taken place and was featured by the corporate monitoring of civil society in Armenia, whose purpose was raising awareness in the civil society and the public.